Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a very special edition of Dispatches. I'm your host, Brady Crytzer. Today I'm coming to you from Rome, Italy. I've been here for a few weeks, and I want to talk about, I think, the American Revolution in the context of the place I am now. So let me start everyone out with a story. When you visit a foreign country, you really get overwhelmed by the sense of space, right? Where you are. In a place like Rome, history piles all around you. You know, you will have ancient history next to medieval history, next to 20th century history. And, you know, my advice for anyone traveling is the best thing to do in that case is just to embrace the chaos. You can't sort it all out. You certainly can't learn everything, so just kind of be where you are and soak it all in. Well, one of the things that, of course, for me, I couldn't help but think about when I'm here in Rome is how did this place react to the revolution? And that sounded like an interesting question for me because from the view of Rome looking out, the American Revolution is very distant. It's very far. But you have to remember the American Revolution is but one revolution in an age of revolutions. And of course, those occur in Eastern Europe, Western Europe, in Russia, in all parts of these little nooks and crannies of the old world that we're not used to thinking about. So I believed, you know, there had to have been something here that we could sink our teeth into as revolutionary historians. And I am certainly and was certainly not disappointed in what I found. So, like anything else in Rome, Rome's reaction to the American Revolution is going to begin with one person. And of course, that one person is the pontiff, the Pope himself. And the Pope in the year 1775 was a man named Pius VI. And I want to give you some background on Pius VI to kind of understand how he plays a role in this revolutionary story. Pius VI was like, quite frankly, a lot of popes coming out of the Renaissance and the early modern period, in that he was an Italian pope from a very wealthy Italian family. He was from northern Italy in a little city called Cesena. And he was from a wealthy, powerful, well-connected family. So even though we don't often think of the Pope as political, even though they always are, in this world of revolutions, Pope Pius VI already had some well-ingrained, deeply and strongly felt beliefs about revolution. Particularly in that he viewed it as a type of anarchy. And he would have said this, I think, even before he became the pontiff, even before he became the successor to St. Peter, the Pope. Just as an Italian nobleman, Pius VI would have felt this way. He is going to become Pope in 1775. So he literally is going to be Pope shortly after the battles of Lexington and Concord. He's going to be Pope in the wake of the Siege of 96 in South Carolina. He's going to be Pope at a time when the social order, the ancien regime, right, the sort of king and his allies placing their boots on the neck of everyone else around Europe, that old feudal system. He's going to become Pope when that system is being confronted and challenged. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, there's going to be revolutions all over Europe. And unfortunately, most of them will fail. The one in America is an extension of that revolutionary world. But when Pope Pius VI becomes, you know, the successor of St. Peter, when he becomes the new Pope, again, this is in the first year of his tenure, tackling this era, this age of revolution is going to be at the top of his list. So I'm going to take you through one of the things the Pope does, if you're not familiar with kind of papal politics in history, how they kind of confront these realities. Popes are extremely powerful, and they are heads of state. as well as heads of government. And the way they communicate to their followers, to the rest of Europe. Remember, the Pope is not in control of the Vatican here, but he's in control of really the whole middle part of Italy, what's known as the Papal States. The way he's going to issue his orders or express his opinions is going to be through issuing what we call papal encyclicals or papal decrees. And I have a copy of a decree he will issue in 1775. Now, forgive me as I go through this because I want to read it exactly as he wrote it. Of course, he writes it in Latin. We'll translate it. But he gives us this really kind of scathing criticism, not just of the American Revolution, but of all revolutions. And he boils it down to a failure of philosophical imagination. He boils it down to a failure to see the benefits of the very ancient and old system that Europe has been operating under for centuries. And he puts it squarely on the shoulders of troublemakers, people he calls, quote, deceitful sages of the time. So here we go. In December of 1775, and excuse my Latin, Pope Pius VI will issue a papal encyclical that he calls Inscrutabili Divinae Sapientia. And this will translate to the inscrutable divine wisdom. Now think about that title right there. The inscrutable divine wisdom. What he's saying here is we have an ancient way of doing things. It comes from God. Monarchs, kings, emperors, they always like to talk about God, right? King Louis of France is in power because he was born of the king and queen. God selected him for that leadership. They never like to talk about hereditary monarchy like it's just the best way of doing things. God always plays a role. And what Pope Pius VI here is saying in this encyclical, just in the title, is that the system that he's protecting and the system that's under attack comes from one place and one place only, which is God. And it's inscrutable, the inscrutable divine wisdom. Okay, so here's how he will start this. He talks about people like John Locke. He talks about people like Jean-Jacques Rousseau. He talks about people like Voltaire. The same people that individuals like Thomas Jefferson, for example, can recite from rote memory. Jefferson was an enormous fan of all of these thinkers. And it was the work of these thinkers that fed directly into a year from this moment, 6 months from this moment, the creation of the Declaration of Independence. Pope Pius VI says this about these new and Enlightenment philosophers. Quote, "Those deceitful sages soften and conceal the wickedness of their doctrine with seductive words and statements. In this way they attract and wretchedly ensnare many of the weak into rejecting their faith or allowing it to be greatly shaken. While they pursue a remarkable knowledge," so he's admitting that, "they open their eyes to behold a false light, which is worse than the very darkness." So look at what we see Pius VI saying there. The people who are writing the philosophy are the problem, but not the people reading it. He calls those philosophers deceitful sages. He says of the readers, they're not bad people for listening to this. They're being taken advantage of. They pursue a remarkable knowledge. They open their eyes to behold a false light. I think that's pretty profound. He goes on to say of these philosophers, "When they have spread this darkness abroad and torn religion out of men's hearts, these accursed philosophers proceed to destroy the bonds of union among men, both those who unite them to their rulers and those which urge them to their duty." This is, I think, where the heart of Pope Pius VI issue or challenge to the American Revolution comes in. Because men like Jefferson and Adams and Patrick Henry and people that we intensely associate with the revolution, talk about two things ad nauseum, and we're glad they do. Freedom and liberty. Freedom and liberty. Freedom and liberty. Pope Pius VI has no problem with freedom and liberty. The problem he has is how you attain it. For Pius, true liberty, true freedom, doesn't come from a person on earth, but it comes from God above. The Catholic Church has always maintained, and this is part of the reason that the church, Christianity, was so successful against the Romans 2,000 years earlier, was that all people are equal in the eyes of God. So he has no issue with equality. He has no issue with liberty and freedom. How you attain that are where the issues come from. So let's listen to what he says about that. They keep proclaiming that man is born free and subject to no one, Pius says. That society accordingly is a crowd of foolish men who stupidly yield to priests who deceive them and to kings who oppress them, so that the harmony of the priest and ruler is only a monstrous conspiracy against the innate liberty of man. Everyone must understand that such ravings and others like them, concealed in many deceitful guises, cause greater ruin to public calm the longer their impious originators are unrestrained. Yikes, right? What an incredible sort of damning indictment of Enlightenment thought. And again, Pius VI is not just coming after America here. He's not just coming after what will become the French Revolution, but he's coming after the root of all of those issues, which to him is this very notion of Enlightenment thought. He refers to Enlightenment thought as, quote, the pestilent disease for which the wickedness of our times brings forth. Now imagine talking about Thomas Paine's common sense as the pestilent disease from which the wickedness of our times brings forth. But that's where he's coming from here. Now let's get to the heart of the matter for the Pope. Why any king, any ruler, any influential person would be against a revolution of free men and women. It's because it's a challenge to their authority. That's what this comes down to. The church, the Catholic Church, the one that Pius VI is leading in 1775, very much mirrors and very much is invested in the same structures of power, the same levers of power as the King of England, as the King of France, as the various kings of Germany or the emperors of Spain. There's a hierarchy. And that hierarchy, while it's efficient, while it's effective for their style of rule, is too rigid for these revolutionary peoples, right? In order for all people to be equal and free in the eyes of the law, you have to tear that hierarchy down. So, although we often separate church and state, I think it's really important that when you look at the power structure of the Catholic Church in the 18th century and the power structures of the European monarchies of the 18th century, they are not indifferent. And that's why they're so often tied together. In that way, that's kind of a top-down viewpoint. From a bottom-up viewpoint, in that way, you can see an argument where people say, well, these same power structures, while yes, they do maintain order and keep a very few people at the top, keep everyone else down. They depress individualism. They suppress individual achievement. This, of course, is the arguments that Enlightenment thinkers would use. So, as I walk through the streets of Rome, and I'll maybe show you some images here, I couldn't help but think about, the far-reaching global implications of the revolution and what that looks like. So, what happens to Pius VI? Obviously, with the American independence movement and the Treaty of Paris in 1783, he couldn't have been too happy. Well, he probably wasn't. But I think this is very forward thinking. He doesn't let them those successes stop him in his papal duties. Because like it or not, the old order has fallen in America and new order has been established. That is an order, however you look at it, that will really possess freedom of religion as a big part of it. And whenever Pope Pius sees the new world, what he sees in this new American Republic is an opportunity to grow his own church. So in 1784, I think this is really important, just 1 year after the revolution ends, Pius VI creates what he calls a new prefecture in North America, based out of the city of Baltimore. Now, America is not a diocese in the traditional sense that the Catholics would have one yet, but it will be. But Maryland was founded as a Catholic colony a century earlier. There were many Catholics living in and around Baltimore. It made sense to Pius VI that that should be the heart of the Catholic world in North America, in America. So, Baltimore will always kind of be the Catholic heart of America. Up until the 1990s, there was something called the Baltimore Catechism in the Catholic Church. That's where that comes from. The first bishop, effectively the first high-ranking Catholic in America, will be the Bishop John Carroll. This all comes from, I think really tellingly, the Pope not willing to view the American Revolutionary victory as a personal defeat. But I think looking forward, trying to make the most of a new situation that's developed. So what does happen to Pope Pius VI? Well, it actually goes really bad for him, because the fear Pius always had back at home was that if you get rid of monarchies, those rigid power structures, then people will begin to question everything. And before long, there'll be a people who don't need religion anymore. There'll be a people who don't need governments, he fears anymore. There'll be people who don't value the old guardrails that kept European society together. And that's exactly what's going to happen to him. Napoleon will actually throw the Pope in jail, Pius VI, and he will die in prison as a result. And that was viewed as sort of almost an atheistic government takeover, sort of a casting down the Catholic Church. And what's really compelling is, even though he's in prison, Pius VI was a relatively young man. He'll die in the 1790s. He will be, at the time, the longest serving pope, second only to St. Peter himself. So Peter was kind of named pope after his death in terms of the institutionality of the Catholic Church. Pius VI has a pretty good run, and that is not a small thing. I was actually able to see Pius VI's grave while I was here. I wasn't here on a research trip, but, when you're traveling, sometimes research trips find you. So that's kind of funny. But I wanted to share that with everyone as we go forward. So no matter where you are, whether you're in Rome, whether you're in America, whether you're in Britain or France or Canada or Mexico, the world is a connected place. And the revolution can sometimes pop up in unexpected places. All right, everybody, if you want to read the article that I wrote that accompanies this episode, just go ahead to the Journal of the American Revolution website, www.allthingsliberty.com. Search for my name, Brady Crytzer. You could also search for Pius VI. They don't come up. There's only one article, I think, about him. And you can take a look at this encyclical yourself and maybe parse it out and find some new things. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time here on Dispatches.